Hey up and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. It is great to be with you. I'm hoping it's sunnier where you are than where I am in lovely Lancashire. It's a lovely place, nice and green, and I wonder why it's so green. And then I realise and remember because of that horrible stuff that comes out of the sky and makes it all the greenness more green. So it is a bit grey today, but hoping wherever you are and wherever you're listening, it is nicer and sunnier. Steve, are you well, my friend?
Yeah, landed back last night from sunnier climate, and then little boy had me up at 2, so I've been up for quite a while. Feels like it's probably evening already, and yeah, get ready to go again, I guess. But yeah, all good. And yeah, life's good, man. Can't complain.
Steve, what Steve hasn't mentioned there that it was what's the word I'm looking for? It was a leisure trip, right? Played golf, right? So it wasn't like he'd had to go to travel for work. So don't feel too sorry for him that he had to get up at 2:00 this morning. He's played golf for the last 3 days.
Just put my tiny violin back in the drawer. That's all right, everybody.
Love it. Well, he's brilliant to be joined by our guest today, Joe Hardy, and we'll let Joe introduce himself in a moment. But we're very much looking forward to this conversation because I know that in a day-to-day job, there's a conversation around innovation, and then in some of the initiatives that she's been involved with. We're looking forward to having this conversation. Joe, just tell our listeners a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, I'm Joe Hardy. So I'm Director of Innovation at RM Resources. I've been in the education industry around 18 years. Not always at TTS, but mostly TTS RM. I'll probably use those two names, and they do link together. So TTS is, I guess, the brand name which releases all the resources, and RM is the parent company. So I'll probably use them intermittently, but we're the same, just for clarity. And yeah, I've been developing resources, working with teachers, educators, advisors, schools for quite a long time now. So I've been through a few different changes in the industry. Really love education. It's a passion of mine. So I'm really lucky to be in a job where I can create resources that hopefully have some impact on education and learning outcomes for children.
Love it. And you're also in that space from a governor perspective
Yeah,
as well, aren't you?
I'm a school governor. I've done a number of terms as school governors. I'm on my second school now. It's the school where my children attend. A really great insight into how a school actually runs, all the ups and downs, the things that the head teachers have to deal with. It's a real eye-opener, I would say. But again, something I really enjoy doing, and an opportunity for me to give back as well.
And I think, just from my perspective, I think Ben's a chair of governors at primary. Ben, I was a governor at secondary, and then moved to be chair of primary as well. And I think as we drive for digital and understanding of teaching and learning in what is now and what is the future, I think having an understanding of education technology, digital, and everything else on every board, and giving guidance to and supporting those leaders, not just the educators, to have an understanding of what the steps that they need to take, is pretty much vital, I would say. And it's probably something that I've pushed for a long period of time, because sometimes you're working with schools and trusts, and without that guidance, things get missed. And also, that head teacher has probably come from an education background, and actually the guidance of that is probably not their bag. So I think they need that rounded approach on the governorship and the trustee and the board level to just help support their understanding of and that future gazing. Do you find that that's probably a role that you play often, Joe?
Yes, particularly working with the head teacher, they're under so much pressure. All the way from the dreaded Ofsted call that comes, and you're on your toes, ready to be there and support. Through to auditing or having a new telephone system. So the amount of work they're doing, and this is beyond the day-to-day where they're dealing with parents and children and their staff, that actually their space, their brain space, sometimes is not there to enable them to get into the detail of what they might want to be doing in the future, or what they might want to be thinking about with EdTech. So I often in my role at TTS RM, but also as a governor, I can combine those, and I'll often attend shows like the School and Academy show or, Bet show, and I can do that on behalf of both with my governor hat on and go, what will work for our school, or what do I want to update our head about, but also from a perspective where I'm looking, for perhaps new things that'll help me in my day job.
Yeah, I love that. So, Director of Innovation as a job title, okay, not necessarily about what happens, like the individual products and all that kind of stuff. That's we can link to your LinkedIn page after and let people know about what RM and TTS do. In terms of like what Director of Innovation means, I know that one of the things that came up in preparing for this was about that development of an innovation culture, and we are huge proponents around culture. In fact, we released a trends booklet this year. In fact, we released a trends booklet for the last few years as part of our awards that we do, which many of our listeners are involved with and get involved with. And one of the things that comes up there is about, we know that we need innovation strategies. We know that we need EdTech strategy. We know that we need AI strategies. But actually underpinning all of that is a starting with culture first. And you can have all the strategy in the world and want to do X, Y, and Z. But if your team aren't on board and there isn't a managed risk culture, an awareness of trying new things type culture, it is cultural, it's vision and value based. So I wonder what that looks like as a director of innovation and helping develop that innovation culture. What do you see in that space?
Yeah, it's really interesting because this job I don't feel existed probably sort of 10 years ago. It was kind of new to me, although I've always worked in that role of developing things. But on a broad, more holistic scale, absolutely, you've got to be prepared to fail. Fail every day. In small ways, and like you say, you take a calculated risk, and you don't want to do anything that would put anyone at risk on big scales, but ultimately you've got to be there thinking, I'm going to try this and I'm going to be prepared for it not to be perfect. I'm going to have a go, and I'm going to be prepared to get better at it as I go along, or incorporate something new as new technology comes into the market or becomes more available or accessible. There's a big fear of, and I find it a little bit in education that we've always done, we've always done it this way, and we've always got this, and there's lots of problems still, I think, within school, not necessarily schools themselves, but the infrastructures and stuff like that, like Wi-Fi, broadband, all of those make it sometimes difficult to experiment with new technologies, perhaps with AI and things. But there's certainly ways around it, and I think what you've got to be is open-minded, mitigate the risk as much as you can, be prepared to fail, and build that into your team around you. And you've got to manage that up, because I give my bosses probably a few headaches sometimes because I've got to try, I try not to push the boundaries too much. But if you don't, you just do what you've always done, or you're doing what someone else has always done, and you're not getting anything new from it. And manage it down so that your team feel able to go and try things or do things, and have this culture of being able to think. I think thinking is a big thing, that we're rushing around so much all the time. We don't take the time to be creative, to think, to talk to each other. And there's certainly things I try and encourage within the culture of our team. And I try and talk as a governor and as the trustee of a charity where we're trying to help children. I'll try and help them just take a step back, have a look at what's worrying and what's small stuff and what doesn't have to be perfect, and try and, get to where you need to be with those things, and give yourself time then to do some of the more innovative, perhaps challenging, risk-taking, scary stuff, but it's the things that move you forward. So I hope that made some sense. I felt I was a bit going all over the place there, but yeah, that tends to be how things are for me.
And I love that. I think that space to create, to think, and to develop new ideas. I think you talked about from ground level, and you pushing back to the boss. But I think that also takes the leadership to have an understanding of not just recruiting for yes and remain in the status quo. I think you need different ideas and different thoughts, that diversity and rebel ideas thinking, from Matthew Said, where it's all about that thing of recruiting based on people's ideas that will disrupt positively an organisation and create positive conflict and challenge, rather than just, like you say, that whole thing of education being stuck often, I think, because of not just the leaders in the organisations at every sector, but beyond that, of driving towards accountability and outcomes that are just results based, rather than the whole focus of actually what education and learning is about. I think it's not just preparing people for the world and preparing people for the next step. Actually, what is the world? The world is ambiguous and is ever changing, and there is no flexibility or freedom within the education system. Primary is a little bit different. I think there's a lot more play. There's some really wonderful learning processes, but that's often, let's create this, let's do this, let's create some fun and some learning. But as you go through the structures and the key stages as we've set it, it then becomes shackled of, you sit at desks, you listen, we will give you this information and you will regurgitate it for an exam. And I think it's all down that leadership right from the top, but also teachers having that freedom to push back and knowing that when they push back, they're not always going to get it right. And that flexibility of when they try something new, that they won't be then called out by a leader either above them in terms of manager, a leader in terms of a head or whatever, CEO or anything, or obviously then the government to then say, we gave you, but we told you it won't work, and now let's tell everybody and let's call you out in front of everybody. I think that's a real risk in education, where risk-averse education has been created because we've become compliant because we're fear of creativity and something better.
Yeah, and I
feel I waffled a lot there.
No, I agree, and there's a lot of. I'll try not to go on one here. I'll keep it short because I could for a while, but just with my own experience,
go on,
my own.
Go for it.
Go on.
Get on your soapbox. Come on, this is why we brought you on. We're disruptors here. Don't stick to the status quo. Don't
School
be
uniform
safe.
Then no, but
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, the it drives me up the wall.
I'm glad you've taken your shirt and tie off before you joined us, because my 4-year-old who started reception has to wear a shirt and tie.
I've got 2 children, one in primary. That is more relaxed, and I completely agree with you there. Wrapping children up in shirts and ties and blazers, little children who want to play and move, is really restrictive in many ways. But in secondary school, the way they're asserting their control over their ability to control the school is via these small, insignificant things like school uniform. So, no, you've got too much ankle on show. Oh, you've got 2 earrings in your ears. Oh, you've got the wrong socks on. And it really does get my goat, because I don't understand how that impacts how a child can learn. And actually, you're teaching them the complete opposite of what they sell you, that we want everyone to be an individual and we want everyone to be able to express themselves how they want, but you've all got to look the same. And you've all got to wear these clothes. Yep. And if you don't, you're going to get a detention, and then you're not allowed on the school trip because you've worn the wrong trousers for 3 days in a row. And I just don't understand how that in any way helps children develop a really strong sense of self, be able to push the boundaries, which I encourage, because I'm really bad and I'm like, you're wearing them trousers because they're your trousers. And they get scared. They get scared of doing anything wrong. And these are the tiny little things that don't matter. They're not significant, but the way the school is controlling and making themselves look a good school is because they can control their children to move around and behave in a certain way. And yet, what are they learning from that? What really are they learning? And that's what gets me. So school uniform's one of them, the assertion of control that is, in my opinion, not the right way of doing things.
And to jump into that, like, I had a conversation recently about haircuts. Right.
Now,
I don't have a challenge with that anymore, but I used to do, and I did used to push them boundaries in that space. I had spoke to a child earlier who was excluded from school, not like actually excluded from school because they had a skin fade, and that skin fade meant that their hair was too short. And ultimately, one of the things that you said there is I don't understand what impact it has on learning. And I think if you're speaking to, like, because I asked them what's the rationale for these rules, and the rationale for the rules is if they can deal with these little things and be told what to do on these little things, they'll understand how that then means that as citizens they need to do as they're told. And I went, whoa. Like, becoming an active citizen means that you should do what you're told. That's what we say. Well, it's about if you can follow them rules, you'll be able to follow the rules around taxes, you'll be able to follow the rules around the rules of the road. And you just think, hold on a minute, like, surely we explain reasons for rules. I'm not saying we don't have rules. I'm not saying we don't have boundaries.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like my kids have bedtimes. I know people who have who bring up their children don't have bedtimes, and they, like, when the children are tired, they go to bed. I'm like, that's okay. I get it. It's your freedom and to do that. My kids have bedtimes, and we work with them. They're not always like strict weekends. It doesn't work the same way, or if they've got an event or something else. But ultimately, like, it doesn't have to be that. And interestingly, when you're talking about from an innovation perspective, when you put things in a box and say, these are the rules, these are the only things that we can play with, then it absolutely stifles innovation, because it's not about thinking outside the box, because I don't believe in that nonsense either.
No.
But ultimately, if you put control and guardrails and say, these are our parameters and we've got nothing else to go from, it doesn't allow that, like you said, that innovative thinking that you were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah, and I like to say the rules, not laws. You're not breaking the law by, wearing the wrong thing. And by doing it, the consequences, they make children scared of consequences that, again, the consequences are quite insignificant in a way. Detention isn't perhaps great, but it's not the end of the world either. And they need to, these are also things they need to be able to deal with, because things go wrong. And you can't always, colour within the lines and then, and never get in trouble, or, never fail an exam, or, never make a mistake. And, I think it feels like they're kind of teaching them to say, like you've just said, if you follow all these rules, you'll be able to follow all these rules here and you'll never get anything wrong. But when you never get anything wrong, you never really move forward or learn anything. And in terms of innovation, a lot of the best innovations are things that went wrong to start with, and then they've been developed in a way and they've been used usually in a different way from what they were meant for, because they went wrong and someone actually tried something. So, I'm all for thinking, how do we think differently? How would we tackle having lots of different voices and opinions and thoughts in the room? And a lot of that comes from people feeling comfortable to express themselves and who they are, and their backgrounds will obviously influence some of that. How they're able to perhaps dress will influence some of that. But when people are more comfortable, they're absolutely more creative. And to me, creativity is a massive plus when you've got to go and get a job and, do real things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that whole thing about feeling comfortable, whether that's personality, whether that's dress, whether that's just approaches to different things, I think, allows it. When I was in education, I often joked. I once went into a meeting with some senior leaders across the Multi-Academy Trust, and I wore pretty much what I wear. I don't wear socks, Joe, so that's just a standard thing. So I'll wear rolled up trousers and like a t-shirt or something. And I went into a room, and as I stood up to present, everybody looked as if why is this guy wearing rolled up chinos and a baggy t-shirt and some fancy trainers, in terms of not fancy in terms of expensive, just I like to wear different trainers. And then I made a joke when they looked like that, and I said, sorry, everybody's wearing fancy dress. I didn't realise there was a fancy dress code because everybody was wearing shirts and ties. It didn't go down well, I'll be honest, it didn't. And I was just getting up to present. So, and then after that, I had a conversation with my leadership in regards to, actually, what, I'm here for my ideas, not what I look like. People have to look past that, I think, and that's not what we're creating. Ben talked about that innovation, and I think, trying different things. How many times do people just stick to that path I can't remember which one university. I think it might have been the University of York, but I'm probably completely thinking differently. But where they were building a new part of the campus, and they didn't put any paths in. They put some guides in and let people walk where they want to walk, and put the paths in based on all of their walking patterns, because they then said, we want you to create the paths of how you're going to get to the campus and get to us, rather than telling you how to get here. And I was like, oh my days, I absolutely love it. To be fair, they're probably in September, and it's probably Freshers Week just happened or coming up. People are probably devastated that they were getting their shoes muddy. I like the idea, rather than actually the fact that they've got to clean the trainers when they get in. But I was like, we do that. We create paths and tell people how to do it. There is no creativity or innovation. Me and Ben have talked about creating that culture of rainforests, of wonderful shoots of outstanding practice and ideas, rather than just cultivating your crop like you're a farmer. I think that's the thing, where if you want things to grow in a certain way, great, but you'll always get the same result. And if there's ever bad weather, then you're at risk. Whereas actually, if you create things differently, sorry, Joe, you come in there.
No, I was just thinking, I know you guys are from a teaching background, all the teachers I work with, they're all massively passionate about doing the best for the children that they work with. I've not met one who doesn't want to do the best for their children. They just feel stifled, and I think they can feel themselves. So they find then it hard to say, oh, I'm going to go and do this with my group of children, because there's so many things these days, whether it's, parents who now have a load of rules that they're able to use to say, well, you shouldn't have done this, or you can't do that, as well as, some of the more governmental things, perhaps like Ofsteds and audits, that are checking you all the time as to what you're doing. But as a teaching profession, I've never met a more passionate group of people who want to do the best for children, and it's more the system that they're in that keeps them stops them doing what they really, really want to do.
Yeah, I agree, and we and this isn't just system bashing. It's not school bashing at all.
No.
None of us are saying that. I think the work that you've done, consistent, the fact that being a governor in a primary school is not something you go, oh yeah, I've got no time to give to anything. I'll just tell you what I'll do. It's demanding, and
it is. It's not easy. You don't just you can't just sit there.
No, you can't. And to be fair, there's a lot of people who are armchair critics and are actually getting their hands dirty and trying to get involved. That's not what we're trying to say. In fact, like I said, I mentioned earlier about our awards stuff, and the fact that we celebrate and bring teachers onto this podcast, and we talk about how we help teachers. Almost all of it, always, we're saying teachers, head teachers, support staff, students, all the people that work in the background around schools to make them work, they're under an immense amount of pressure.
Yeah.
So why don't we change the conditions that we're in? And that's where we are. And interestingly, one of the things that I know that you were passionate about, and it's a few weeks ago since this happened in the UK, was National Coding Week. And part of that was there's the kind of premise around National Coding Week was this idea that learning to code is as important now to learn how to read and do maths. Now, obviously, in this age of AI, with the change and what that means in terms of coding and whatever else, some people might have a different opinion in that space. Yeah. So I wonder, if you obviously are passionate about that early years coding, that computational thinking. I wonder if you could talk at that a little bit about why you've been involved in that, why you're passionate in there.
Yeah, I think it's come from, we've had, as you know, like a Bebot resource around for 20 years, so Bebot's birthday, and there's resources that have been developed pre-Bebot and post-Bebot. So what I've learned as I've gone along is I'm looking at how children are learning and how children are developing, and also what's happening in the world. So what kind of jobs might we be doing in the future? Most of them probably don't exist yet. So there's a whole host of things going on, and in terms of looking at early years coding, it's more about an introduction to robotics and coding at a young age that's more play-based. It's certainly not, let's get a 2-year-old to learn how, an algorithm and but it's more that computational thinking, recognizing patterns, if I press this, cause and effect, what happens? And having that in a format that is technology based, because it's happening all the time. I know those things happen in a number of different ways through lots of play activities, whether children are using schemas, for example, they'll be picking up some of that type of thinking, but it's not in a way that they understand is progressive, because you can't understand it at that age. So to have a robot within a friendly robot in early years to represent perhaps some of the things they might start seeing out and about, because robotics are around us. There might be the robot who delivers your food. It might be the robot, Milton Keynes have them, the little robots, the Amazon robots that deliver parcels to you. Passport control is certainly automated and has technology such as facial recognition. So bringing those types of technologies, just introducing them in a really, really gentle, play-based, friendly way, rather than jumping in straight into a coding experience and go. And coding, I still think, is a really useful skill, but the technology and computational thinking can be implicit. And you can do it in a number of ways across a different range of play activities or curriculum activities, involving a number of resources. But that thinking is what we need, that ability to think really well. And for some people, we do need coders. We will need a whole host of people working in a technology industry in a number of years' time to manage all these technologies that are coming out and make them useful, valuable, accessible, safe for everybody to use. So it's about an introduction in the most appropriate way possible, without this chucking this in and going, there we go, we're going to teach you about coding at 2. That isn't really where I'm coming from, but it is let's introduce it like you would introduce talking about letters and sounds, or you talk about numbers. Let's just talk about how this robot reacts if you do these things, and let's talk about what happens if you press, can you follow this pattern and remember it? And it's a tool to help do that. And that's where I'm coming from, that it's a skill that I think you can be introduced a little bit earlier in a play-based way, but a more explicit way through a robot, as opposed to trying to pick it out of other things that might be happening in that.
I think so, and I think that so critical thinking, being able to analyse there, be able to start to think about process, order, but also the thing that I love about it, and my brother has lived and worked in Taiwan for in the education system for a long time, and they introduced coding. I think it's compulsory from the age of 6 in terms of their curriculum and a lot of the stuff that they're doing, if it's appropriate, depending on the school, but also there's some guidance and some support there. It works in an international school. But actually, the technology and coding enables and allows to try something, learn it, but actually it will have an impact if you get it wrong, and it will show, because actually it won't work. But you can start again, reapply, have a conversation, ask the questions, because I think we talked about question and the ability to act for people, for individuals to ask questions and the right questions, get the responses back, get coached, and then go, okay, now I think I can do it better. Show it, but because often when they're drawing and they're doing some things, not criticising that, they're getting worried, and then they're having to rip it up and start again, because it's in a form where actually when you make a mistake, it's a bit more permanent. And I think it's that practice makes permanent rather than perfect. I think we need to teach to our kids that ultimately you will learn more and it'll be there and you can apply it. You don't have to be perfect.
No.
And I think that's a great thing to develop at such a young age.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it is that experimental and experiential play. And I think there's ways, like I say, of just introducing some of what's happening in the world, and questioning is a big one, I think, because to have the skill to ask the right questions to get what you need out of some of this technology that's around, AI being one of them, is a skill in itself. And if you can't prompt engineer really well, what comes out the other end is what we've been putting in it for God knows how many years, and how good, right, accurate, bias is that. So all of those skills that we refer to, 21st century learning skills, the 4Cs, critical thinking and collaboration and such like, are really key to be able to not just use the technology, but interpret the tech, what comes out of the other end, as to whether that's useful or not, and not rely on it. It's what we can do with the technology as humans, as opposed to what the technology gives us and we just accept.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that actually the argument that I feel like we've been banging on about for a while, and I say this quite a lot. I used to be a religious studies teacher, so my background as in the critical thinking, philosophical, looking at things from a variety of viewpoints. Interestingly, that is the bit that we're talking about here. It's not about necessarily coding. You must learn how to use all these languages. You must be an expert in Python and then be able to use C++ and then and then being able to do all that, because actually the AI systems will probably do that, the debugging of that and the writing of that, probably more accurately than humans. However, that computational thinking, which, because it's got the word computational in it, most people think obviously that's to do with computers, that's to do with tech, it's to do with IT, it's about computer science. That doesn't happen in English, that doesn't happen in religious studies, that doesn't happen in PE, and it's nonsense, because that ability from computational thinking is about systematic following orders, systems, working at things, looking at how things work, and it allows you to approach those complex problems that aren't straightforward. So rather than saying we're going from A to B, we're saying, actually, why do we go from A to B? Is there a different route to go from it to A to B? Is there a faster route? Is the faster route the better route? And therefore, that development in education of the ability for and you coming back to what you said very, very early on, that ability to think and think differently, and then be able to justify why you made a decision, even if it's not right. You mentioned about failure earlier. Stephen Bartlett obviously talks a lot about this, is that failure equals feedback, feedback equals knowledge, knowledge equals power. And that idea that if we want to be strong and be better, we've got to fail, and failing has to be we have to be able to think through that failure. It's not about failing and okay, then moving on. It's failure and realizing what works, what doesn't work, looking at it computationally, and then coming into that innovative space. And I think, interestingly, in a lot of the work that resonates with what we're doing is this ability to not just think it's about a product or it's about a system. It's about, does this fit? We say quite a lot, right tool, right job type conversation. I think that's where we're at, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's, I think innovation and around innovation. So failure for us is, like I say, we feel like we fail on a lot of things, and it's understanding that it's a bit of resilience when that happens, and you've got to go, actually, that didn't work out, and I can't pack in, because if I pack in now, I'm not going to get anywhere. So you need a bit of resilience, but also just having perspective. It really isn't the end of the world, Yeah, we've built for us, if as an example, we've built a product and it's meant to be waterproof, and it's got to testing stage, and we've tested it and it's not waterproof. And we're like, oh no. But what's big perspective? It hasn't. It's our testing system worked really well, because that stopped, so that didn't fail, even if the product did. And actually, we can take it back, we can mend it, we can fix it, we can make it fit for purpose. It didn't go out to any schools or any children and cause adverse issues or problems for them. But yes, we still failed on something. But it's the perspective that you need, that actually that wasn't the end of the world. And sometimes I think we teach children that if they do something wrong, or something's gone a bit wrong, that the whole world's going to implode, and it's really hard for them to get out of that thinking, and therefore they do the best not to do anything wrong. And no one goes out the way to do things wrong. It's just the nature of life, isn't it? Things go wrong all the time. But being able to handle it and deal with it and get perspective on it is another skill, I think, that comes from having that open, more innovative culture that I think works for us here. Hopefully it'd work in, would work in schools if they could feel more comfortable doing it sometimes.
And I think it's that education really considering not everything will work, of course, but then looking at it and going, it works in industry, it's not going to work for us. And I think it's that whole thing of, I know we're a very different subject, but hybrid working doesn't work, and I know it doesn't work for teaching as an example, or this doesn't work for us and this doesn't work. And I think it's that shutdown, and we will only listen to our education system. And I think that's bred from leadership. I think if you look at mentoring and coaching, often it's by people that have done it previously. Just because they've been in leadership roles doesn't mean it's been a positive experience and a strong one. And I think having people like yourselves that are in industry onto boards and guiding teachers and mentoring and supporting them, as you've said, is key, because without it, you only do what you know, and doing things over and over again and expecting a different result often is a definition of insanity. I don't even know who quoted it, but I think that's really, you look and you just go, come on, you just have to think differently, because I say this probably at least 3 times every podcast. I talk about it often. Ella and my daughter, who's 4, and all young people generally, we're delivering in an analog world, or in an analog style often, to children that are in a streaming service, if you can put it as simple as that. And we're delivering in ways, or we're teaching the way that we often want to, but we have to forget that it's not about us, it's about the young people and how they now want to learn. And that will be painful, that will be challenging, but we have to change it, because ultimately taking that risk, is it not a bigger risk to stay and currently do what we've always been doing?
Yeah, and it's not always, you might take the risk and it might not work, as we said, and it doesn't mean you can't go back and do something else. It's not a one or the other situation always. If it doesn't work and something worked better that you did before, you can go back and do it like you did it before. And I think it's sometimes the pressure that teachers in particularly feel that that's a lot of work, in all fairness, to go and do something, it doesn't work, and reverse it all and do something else. And that fear of having to do that just on top of, I know, everything else that they're doing at the time, can make you not even do anything in the first place, and it's easier to stand still. And again, that goes back to just some of the other things that go on in school. And I know my head teacher it was an audit that we'd got coming in, and she was so stressed about this audit, even more than Ofsted. I think she felt more stressed. And I said, look, what do you think it's going to? She said, I think it'll be fine, but I want it to be better. And she wants it to be better because she wants it to be better for the school, and not for her, for the school and for the children. And I said, look, sometimes things just have to be okay. And so long as they're okay and there's no major pitfalls, deal with that being okay, and it lets you go and do other things. But I know a lot of teachers and head teachers are probably feeling in that space, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge to get out of it.
It is a challenge, and the pressure and the fear, and actually the fear of failure, I think, is sometimes, like somebody says, again, we're doing this, me and Steve are doing this again, like we hear something and we think, I don't know exactly where that was from, but it sounds good. It's that, like, that 80% of worries never actually become a real thing, right? So it's that the fear of failure sometimes becomes, or the fear of getting, not even failure, the fear of it not working out exactly how we wanted it to. And I'm a perfectionist. Steve will attest to that, and look at his face, like as if he's surprised at that. Like, my one of my best pals when I used to work in a school used to say this. He went, "No one died, Ben."
Yeah, like, I always say that.
No one died, and you're like, yeah, but, and he went, yeah, but no one died. And we're not talking about life and death. We're talking about, and we know that we're not saying it's not important. We're not saying that young people's futures and presents aren't super important, and the world needs like that space. But actually, the learning happens in that space. The learning happens. You say that, don't they? That you learn to drive once you've passed your test.
Yeah.
Once you're actually doing it and you're realizing, oh, I mean, that's harder than I thought it was. Oh, I've got to think around it. And yeah, just to take it in a little bit of a different direction, but I think it's definitely related. You're a trustee at Ignite Futures, a Nottingham-based charity. I'd love to kind of hear about, because obviously that ties into what you're doing. But what is it that you're doing there, and why did you get involved with that?
So I got involved with them again it was through my job. So I try and do as much with the community as I can, because I think you're learning more from what's happening outside rather than what's happening inside. And we have a thing called the Festival of Curiosity, Science and Curiosity, that happens in Nottingham. And so initially, as a company, we got involved with that, and that's where I met them. So we hosted an event, and I got to know some of the people who work there. And then they were advertising for trustees, and I thought I really like what they're doing. So the ethos is particularly supporting disadvantaged children and giving them opportunities around more STEM-based learning opportunities, and building curiosity. So it's holding workshops perhaps for them, after-school clubs, breakfast clubs, holiday clubs. There's a big festival, as I've just mentioned, of science and curiosity. There's schemes for early years. We've got called Curious Tots, and that's again, and it's about creating activities and workshops and sessions for young children to go and explore and be curious and I guess enjoy learning. It's not teaching as such. It's much less restricted in that sense. It's not a learning outcome here for them. It's the freedom to go and enjoy and have fun and be curious about the world in a way that's secure and safe for them. And we do focus on children who are in disadvantaged or deprived areas or circumstances. So perhaps with refugees, we have a scheme for after school and breakfast clubs and holiday clubs to make sure children from refugee families are getting fed, and at the same time they're experiencing some of these learning experiences through our volunteers. So we've got a number of volunteers and employed staff who go and run these sessions, and some of them are qualified teachers, some of them are not, some of them are perhaps students and things like that. They'll go through a process to ensure that they're able to go and work with the children. But it creates a really nice experience, and we've got about 6 programs that we run through the year, engaging children of all ages, so early years, and we do touch in some secondary as well. Just run a fashion type program for secondary school children to get involved in sort of creative arts and things through fashion. So yeah, something close to my heart because it's great. It's for those children, I guess, who are just going to have a hard time sometimes, and doesn't matter what they're doing in school or what else is going on, they don't always get to do these things. So yeah, it's nice.
And I think it's giving those experiences, giving those opportunities, and setting them up that actually experiences outside of education, often that are outside of the classroom, are the ones that gear them up and give them a learning that then is taken back into the context. It drives them and lights the fire, because learning's learning. I don't know. Apologies to all the religious people and everything else. I'm not going to absolutely criticise, but I think it's that whole thing of religion and church, school and education and school or buildings, and I think it's all that whole conversation around actually learning is learning. What is the purpose of learning? What is the purpose of education? And I think Valerie Hannon said, if we really asked education itself, or many people, do we really know what the purpose of education actually is in England? And how can we drive some opportunities to create better opportunity to bring back, if they've lost sight and passion, or not passionate about that type of education, well, let's create a pathway for them to support them in terms of how they can learn that might not be sitting next to somebody in a classroom or doing something in a particular way, and giving those experiences, I think, is exceptional. So it sounds great.
Yeah, and we're looking at how we show impact for the programs that we run, because it's all charity funded. It's all non-for-profit, so everything we have to bid for money from charitable funds to enable us to run these programs. And we're looking at some of the impacts that we can have, and it's not the learning kind of comes last sometimes, and it's more about the individual and the child. And we're looking at, we've got children who, for them, a real big improvement for them personally would be improvements in their self-esteem. And before, they wouldn't dare talk to an adult, or they wouldn't dare put their hand up. And what we're measuring a little bit is going, how do you feel before you've started this program, and how do you feel at the end? And it's all the little things we're looking for, the ones where they go, I feel more confident going into a room where there's 2 or 3 people. I feel now I could put my hand up and ask a question. Not that I know more about this. That doesn't matter if they know more or they don't know more. But what we're trying to do is give them a little bit more confidence, which I think will help turn them into better learners anyway. But some of them, they've had hard times, real hard times. And some of them are in a new country, for example. So it's really hard for them to access any learning when they're terrified. And so just building some of that base self-esteem, self-worth, confidence to start with, little steps, tiny little steps, are the bits that we're trying to pull out and show, look, doing these community programs really helps these children in ways that perhaps a formal education system, they might not even be quite ready for that actually at this point in time, but they're in it and they might be struggling because they've got other things going on. So it's tapping into some of those other bits that's happening.
I love it, and it sounds like great work that the charity's doing. And I think it's a shame, and I think I said recently that a guy who's become a friend of mine who set up a charity for those people in the neurodiverse space, to a safe space for them. His aim in life is to the charity not to exist. Like, I thought that's what a great thought.
Yeah.
Like, we shouldn't be in a position where we have to create neurodiverse charities or charities to support children that are coming in from other countries that need psychological safety, need a little bit of self-esteem. It should be part of what we do. But it's amazing that there are people out there that are caring enough to be able to do that, and I can imagine it's a tough space, and having been in the charity space myself a little bit, I know that funding's tight, regulations are tight, and so kudos in that. Just before we go to our, we always have a quick fire round where we have a few quick fire questions that we ask our guests. I wonder if there's anything that we haven't talked about today that you feel like we should have talked about.
Oh, I'm not sure, but I read through some of the questions that, or possibly, some of the things. One that was interesting, and I think this perhaps relates to perhaps teachers as well, is why did I choose education? And I thought about it, and actually I don't think I did. I think it chose me. And I think that'll be for everyone, because I'd worked in other industries as well. And I came into this, and there was just something about working in that education space that got me hooked, and I've always stayed there. So I don't think it wasn't a choice by me. I didn't purposely go, I want to be in there, but once I was in, I can't get out because I like it too much. So I don't know whether you guys are the same.
I think we often, and one of our trends this year as well was creating lifelong learning. How can we drive a passion? How can we create and like the fire of everybody, that learning doesn't just stop at a particular age when you've got a result, that actually it's an infinite game, and we're driving for everybody to be curious around and want to learn, whether that's in a building, whether that's actually a formal qualification, or they're just passionate about learning something. I think that's great, and something that we're passionate about, I think, as at the Edufuturists.
I'm just going to plug my laptop in. Apologies, it should all stay as normal. There we go. Sometimes our Wi-Fi can have a little bit of a moment, so I just wanted to let you know I was doing that. You might want to edit that bit out.
Absolutely not. That's staying in. Like a dog barking, or a random person walking in, it all stays in. It all
Right,
stays in.
what I love about that is that the smile, that the thing that makes me smile here is this is the life of working in technology, right? So
Yeah.
you a big technology company, and Steve's the same. Works in technology. I work with technology, digital stuff all the time, and regularly this goes wrong, right?
Do you know what? It's actually worked really well, but sometimes just plugging and unplugging it flips from Wi-Fi to plugged in, and it has a little moment. But no, it's all good.
Love it. Okay, well, we have 3 quick fire questions.
Okay.
So I'll start off. Steve will go, and then I'll come back to it. So it's just your initial gut thoughts, I suppose. So if you could change one thing about education overnight, what would it be?
Oh gosh, I'd give teachers more freedom to teach how they want to teach, and I'd get rid of DFE approved systematic phonics schemes.
Love it. What's the most exciting education trend you've seen emerging?
It is around AI and technology. I think it needs to be embraced. I also think there's a little bit of caution there, but it's exciting, and there's ways in which you can bring this into a classroom in a really appropriate and safe way. So it is exciting to see how the world is changing. I think that could do wonders for education in the right way.
Love it. And finally, who's your biggest inspiration in education?
Oh wow, well there's tons of people really. Gosh, that's hard to say. I guess so I'm going to go with, at the minute, I'm going to go with people I've worked with a long time and I've seen really develop, and that's with the White Rose Maths team. So I worked with Tony and Caroline right at the very, very, very beginning, before they were White Rose Maths, and I've seen their journey, and I've seen what they've done, and I've seen the blood, sweat and tears that's gone into that, and I've seen the passion that they also have. And that's on a personal note, because I know them personally in that way, as opposed to there's someone out there who I can see has achieved great things, but I wouldn't know necessarily how they've gone from A to B. But I've seen some of that journey, and it's been inspirational. So
Love it. It's very, very. It's always good to hear people how they're inspired and what that does in terms of how that shapes the way that we are by being around those kind of people. So, Joe, we've it's been fantastic having you on the podcast. I know we've had some. It's always good to talk about how almost take a little bit of a step back sometimes from the day-to-day of the grind and the driving technology and the reason why we do what we do. And so for people who want to find out a little bit more about what you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'm Joanne Hardy on there. It's got my full name. I tend to go by Jo and day to day. If you want to put my email and stuff in the show notes, more than happy for people just to email me. I'm not behind any closed doors, and that's really frustrating when people give you a customer services number. So yeah. I'm more than happy for people to contact me directly if they wanted to.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for joining us on the Edufuturists podcast. If you are listening to this and you haven't yet got your tickets for Uprising 2025, it might feel like ages away, but it isn't. It's on the 26th of June 2025, which again, like I said, it sounds ages away, but tickets are going. This is going to be an opportunity for us to champion in those in education who are preparing learners for that different future. This is year 7 that we're about to go into. We want to do education awards done differently, celebrate those people who are doing it, but also get that Wolfpack community together. We said before that the strength of the pack is the wolf and the strength of the wolf is the pack. So join us, get your tickets. The link will be in the show notes for this episode, and we will look forward to seeing many of you in the real north in Manchester on the 26th of June. Joe, thanks for joining us on another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. Steve, it has been a pleasure, my friend.
It has, mate, as always. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.